Hey everybody, welcome back to Spoked MTB. My name is Nick and today I'm going to walk you through how to use a Hozan spoke threader. If you've never heard of it, stay tuned, it's going to be awesome. I cut my spokes down, I thread them with this tool so I can just buy one size spoke length, and then I save a little bit of cash along the way, and then I build my wheel with them. So I will show you how it's done, I'll show you the tools, the parts needed to get this process done, and hopefully you can do it for yourself. So without further delay, let's get into it. All right, well, let's hit it. On this side of the table, I have all the tools laid out that I'm going to use to cut and thread the correct spoke length. And I promise you that all of this laid out is used to complete this process. All right, now moving on, I'm going to walk through your parts and your tools that you're going to need to complete this process. And then we'll get into the process of actually cutting and threading your own spokes. And I'll also talk a little bit about the choice of my spokes. Obviously, you need to thread your own spokes. The big dog here, Hozan spoke threader. I think I picked this up for about 160 bucks from Modern Bike. And you also need a die head that is the gauge needed for the spokes that you're going to use. So the most common is probably the 14 gauge die head, and that's going to be for your standard 2.0 spokes or your 14 gauge spokes. So I have a 14 gauge here, and that's what I'm going to use to roll my threads. Well, to go with the Hozan spoke threader, you're going to want some oil. So I just use a 3-in-1 multi-purpose oil, and that is to oil up the rollers on the die head. Next, you need a 2.5 millimeter Allen key. I have this guy right here, and that is to adjust the notch here on the die head. You'll need a pair of cable cutters, something to cut your spokes. You'll need a spoke ruler or a ruler to measure your spokes to get accurate cuts and measurements. You need a Sharpie, something to mark your spoke. I use a silver Sharpie because I build with black spokes. So I have a couple of, I have a vice grip and a crescent wrench. You can use one of the same. So if you have 2 vice grips, you can do that. If you have 2 crescent wrenches, you can do that as well. But I have a vice grip and a crescent wrench that I'm going to use to make adjustments to the die head, and I'll show you how to do that moving forward. Also, a file. And it seems like this is a common factor in all of my videos, along with the spoke ruler. A file basically is going to help you shave down that flat point on the end of a spoke once you make that cut. I have just a regular test nipple right here. I check to make sure that the nipple is threaded on correctly and it goes on smoothly without any complications after I thread using the Hozan spoke threader. And then you need your spokes. I have a couple of J-Bend 2.0 spokes here from DT Swiss, and these are what I'm going to thread today for you as an example. Other than that, that is basically everything as far as tools and parts are concerned. And if you have all of that, you're in good shape. Since we have all of our tools and parts together, let's go ahead and move on into talking about the spokes. All right, as I've said before, these are DT Swiss spokes. They are 2 millimeters, straight gauge, so all the way down it's one length and it's 2 millimeters. There's a debate out there for J-bend and straight pole spokes. So straight pole doesn't have the bend on the end of the spoke and it just goes straight. And you have to have a specific hub for that. You would need to get a straight pole hub to be able to use straight pole spokes. Now, and then vice versa, if you have a J-bend, you need a J-bend hub. They are not interchangeable. These are usually my go-to. I like 2.0 millimeter spokes. J-bend, DT Swiss, they're great spokes. I've used other ones like Halo spokes, I've used Sapem, but it seems like DT Swiss is the best bang for my buck. And I like to build with DT Swiss products as far as the hub is concerned as well. So that's why I choose DT Swiss spokes. So I also use a 2.0 by 12 millimeter brass DT Swiss nipple, as you can see right there. And I buy them in packs of 100. I get them from, I believe, Worldwide Cyclery, and I also bought DT Swiss Champion spokes in bulk as well from there. I will put the links in the description for the things that I've actually bought, and you can go ahead and follow those if you're interested. Okay, so now I have you zoomed in pretty far, and I'm going to walk you through kind of how we're going to measure and cut these. And let me use my spoke ruler here. These look like they are 289 millimeters each. Cut both of them down to 258. All right, so how I'm going to go about doing this is I'm going to use my spoke ruler and take my Sharpie, and I'm going to measure 258. So let me find 258. Here's 260. And what I want to do is make a mark right above that 258 mark. So now I have a mark there 258 that I made with my Sharpie, but I don't want to put it right on the 258 because I want to know where I have to snip the spoke at. I'm going to do the same thing to the second one. Find that 258, make the mark right above it. So there you go. Now I have a couple of spokes marked out at 258. Since now I know I need to make that cut right at the bottom of that Sharpie marker, I'm going to take my cable cutters. And again, it's a good idea to have cable cutters for spoke cutting and cable cutters also for cable cutting because the spokes will dull the cutters. You can see the gray. I'm right below that mark, which I made with my Sharpie. And now I'm going to snip it. Bam. There you go. And you have a clean cut. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the second one. Find that right below that mark that I made. Bam. Now I have my 2 spokes cut. Now what I'm going to want to do is get my file. I'm going to want to file down to a flat point so you don't have a jagged edge. And that should do. Now we're going to get into the threading portion. Okay, so now since we have our spokes cut, it's a good idea to start thinking about your thread length. When we're thinking about thread length, you got to think about the size of nipple that you're going to be using. So I'm using a 12mm brass nipple. With a 12mm brass nipple, you have approximately 10 millimeters of full threads that fully engage. Then you have about 2 millimeters of half threads on the top. If you threaded the nipple onto the spoke all the way to the top where it was flush with the top of the nipple, you would have 2 millimeters of half threads there, which you can do, which is fine. However, fully engaged, you need to at least get 10 millimeters of full engagement. So therefore, I'm going to do about 11 millimeters of thread. I take my Sharpie, I take my spoke ruler, I put the end of the spoke at a mark, a hash mark on the spoke ruler or any ruler, and I mark it right at the 11 millimeter mark, then color that in. I'm going to do the same thing to the second one, get it to 11 millimeters. So now I have 2 spokes that are colored in with silver Sharpie, and that shows my 11 millimeters of thread that I need to make on the Hozan spoke threader. Getting into the Hozan spoke threader of things, I now have my Hozan spoke threader, and you see these 2 little notches here on the bottom of the spoke threader, and what those are going to be used is to mount your spoke threader in the vise. I'm going to tighten that down as hard as possible. Now it's nice and secure. I'm going to take my die head here, I'm going to place it on the shaft of the handle, and as you can see right here, and just to take a closer look, you can see that you have a set nut that the 2.5 millimeter hex key is going to go into and tighten it on to secure onto the lever. And then there's my rollers, which these are what's going to put the thread on the spoke. This nut right here is going to, when turned clockwise or counterclockwise, will move the rollers closer together so you get a deeper cut for the thread, or it'll widen it so that you get less of a cut in regards to the thread. And I'll show you how to adjust those here in a quick second. So first things first, I'm going to put my die head on my shaft there. Use my hex key. Make sure I find, you can see that there's like a little divot in that shaft, right? So that's where you want that bolt to line up and set. And you'll know if it's set or not because the bolt actually won't go all the way down. So you might have to adjust it. And there you go. Now it's set. It's nice and taut. That over there. And now I have my die head ready for threading. These little pawls right here, there's 3 of them. And that is what's going to secure the spoke inside. So you're going to take the spoke and you're going to enter the hole through the lever. And when you line up this spoke, you don't want the spoke to necessarily go right into the die head. You want it to look like there is an imaginary line in front of the die head, and you want to place that spoke just right in front of it. Then you can hold it, use the lever, turning it clockwise to tighten onto the spoke, and those 3 paws need to hit the spoke equally, so make equal contact. It looks like it is. Make it nice and tight. Now that spoke's not going anywhere, so it's ready to be threaded. I can see where my mark is for the length of the thread. They also have notches on the shaft of the handle that are increments of 3 millimeters, so you can kind of gauge how much thread you're putting on your spoke. So when I do this, I want to depress this lever into the spoke until it bites. So once I've felt that it's bit onto the spoke, then I'm going to discontinue depressing and just spin until I'm done with my thread. Then I'm going to back it off in reverse. So before any of this takes place, you're going to want to oil up your rollers. So just a little dab will do, a little dab will do you. And then we also want to maybe adjust using our crescent wrenches or vice grips, adjust the rollers. So I'm going to go clockwise to tighten it a little bit. And you don't want to you want to make small adjustments at a time. So if the die head's not biting, you might want to loosen it by going counterclockwise until you get a bite, and then gradually start going clockwise to deepen the threads so that it fits on smoothly. So right now I'm going to depress, and there it bit. So now I'm going to stop depressing the handle and just spin until I get to the top of my marking where I wanted my threads to be. I'm still moving. All right, looks like I made it. And now I'm going to reverse it back. And just be patient. It does take some time, especially when you're doing it 64 times if you have 32 whole wheels. But kind of gives you a sense of accomplishment knowing that you did it all. All right, I'm going to release, and there you have it. You have a threaded spoke. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my nipple, and I'll put it on the spoke and try to just twist it on. Make sure that there's no hang-ups or burrs, or it's going to fit on nice and clean. And it in fact does. And it went on very easily, so that means I have a good thread on this spoke. Now let me run through it again with the other spoke that I have here. Once again, I'm going to enter from the back of the spoke holder, line it up just right in front of that die head while I have it all the way extended out. Make sure I make equal contact with the spoke on all three pawls. So right there, it didn't allow me to make contact, so I'm going to adjust. There we go. Bam. Nice and tight. Spoke's not going anywhere. I'm going to meet the die head with the spoke. Depress a little bit, not too hard, but just enough pressure. And there you go. You have contact and it's bit. Sorry about the noise. It is a little annoying, especially when you're doing this 100 times. Now I met my markings. Back it off. Loosen. There you go. Another successful spoke thread. I'm going to do my nipple test here, and it's going on seamlessly, so that's a good sign. Perfect. So there you have it. Now I have 2 out of 64 spokes cut and threaded. I believe that this spoke threader is a great way to affordably cut and thread your own spokes so that you don't have to worry about a retailer and buy a specific amount of spokes for a specific wheel build. Now you can buy large amounts of spokes and cut and thread them yourself. It is a little bit more time consuming, another step in the process of building your wheels, but it is satisfying, and you can modify. You can modify your spokes and your lengths to whatever you feel is necessary depending on the wheel build that you're making. Well, there you have it. Now you know how to use a Hozan spoke threader, which hopefully that is helpful because it does save you a little bit of money in the long run depending on how many wheels you are actually going to build. If you thought this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. If you want to see more great content from my channel, Spoke Them TV, go ahead and go check it out. I'm doing the wheel building series like I was saying. It is awesome, comprehensive build from basically measuring the ERD, using a spoke calculator, moving all the way up to balancing and tensioning the wheel. Thanks for watching again, Spoke Them TV. My name is Nick, and I'm out of here.